The cell was damp, the stone walls sweating with the tears of 1,000 condemned men. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, knelt in the dark like any common traitor. His hands trembled, but not from fear, not from the cold, either. It was fury, cold, silent fury that had burrowed its way into his bones like the long northern winter. He had trusted the wrong people. He had honored the wrong throne. They told him to confess, to bend the knee, to save his daughters, that his shame would preserve his family's legacy. But shame was already thick in his throat, choking him harder than any noose could. The day before his public execution, Varys came, not as the spider, not as the whisperer, but as a man who for once looked uncertain. "You still have one choice left, Lord Stark," he whispered through the bars. Ned's eyes, sunken and bloodshot, narrowed. Varys continued, "Death isn't the only exit." Ned chuckled bitterly. "Then tell me, Lord Varys, which door leads out of this pit of snakes?" Varys leaned in, voice almost trembling. "There's a ship. Tonight. 1 hour past midnight. Black cells have a forgotten tunnel. Smugglers used it once. I can open the door, but you must crawl through the filth if you want to live." It sounded like a trap. It sounded like madness. But it was better than bending his neck for Joffrey Baratheon's blade. Better than being remembered as a fool who died for honor while his daughters remained in chains. That night Varys returned. The door creaked. The hinges screamed softly, warning of betrayal. "Now, Lord Stark," the eunuch hissed. Ned moved slowly, stiff from beatings, from rot, from sorrow. His knees cracked as he stood. He paused, only, for a heartbeat, not from doubt but from pain. Then he followed. The tunnel was no wider than a coffin. Its walls bled filth, thick with rat droppings and old blood. His fingers scraped across stone as he crawled like a dying dog. He didn't speak. He didn't think. He just moved forward, inch after inch, breath held, teeth clenched. When he emerged on the other side, into the wet night air and the scent of salt water, he wept. Just once, quietly, salt mixed with salt. The ship was small, manned by 3 silent men in cloaks darker than ravens. They didn't look at him, didn't speak. Varys handed the captain a small pouch. Gold clinked, a deal sealed. Before he stepped aboard, Ned turned. "Why?" he asked. Varys didn't smile. "Because the realm still needs you more than it needs a martyr, and winter is coming." The ship pulled away silently into the fog. Behind them, King's Landing glimmered like a snake coiled in torchlight. Somewhere in that nest his daughters remained. One in the claws of the queen, the other missing. A ghost in a city of knives. Ned Stark was not dead. Not yet. And that meant the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The ship moved like a ghost across Blackwater Bay, gliding through fog thick enough to swallow lantern light. Ned stood on the deck, wrapped in a stolen cloak, watching the city vanish into shadows behind him. His wrists still bore the bruises of chains. His mind, heavier than his body, replayed every wrong move, every trusted smile that had turned to betrayal. He should never have trusted Littlefinger. He should have known that the throne had no room for honor. The captain said nothing during the voyage. The crew offered no food, no comfort, only silence. Ned preferred it that way. Talking meant remembering. Remembering meant pain. By the time they reached the mouth of the Blackwater, the fog lifted and the sea opened into a silver plain beneath the moon. The captain finally broke the silence. "You've got a choice now, Lord Stark. South to Dorne, east to Essos, or back north." Ned didn't hesitate. North. He didn't say to Winterfell. He didn't say to my family. He just said north. Because that word was enough. That word was everything. They docked near Gulltown 3 days later. Ned slipped off the ship unnoticed, a ghost in the early dawn. The air was colder now, carrying the whisper of snow. He travelled on foot through forest trails and mountain passes, avoiding roads and gold cloaks. With every mile, the beard on. His face thickened, his posture straighter, his will harder. At night he stared into campfires, imagining his daughters' faces. Sansa, trapped in the Red Keep, a pawn of Cersei Lannister. Arya, gods only knew where, lost or hiding or dead. He pictured Robb in Winterfell, angry, confused, perhaps marching to war already. And Catelyn, her pain haunted him worst of all. By the time he reached the Neck, he had shed the last pieces of his old life. The noble lord in fine cloaks and clean boots was gone. What walked now was something colder, something forged in betrayal and sharpened by loss. It was Howland Reed who found him, or maybe Ned found him. The Crannog men watched the marshes, with eyes that never blinked, and when Ned stepped into their territory, they emerged like the swamps themselves had spat them out. Howland approached in silence, crossbow ready but not aimed. "Ned Stark," he said flatly. "Alive," Ned answered. Howland's eyes narrowed. "I saw your head on a spike." "You saw what they wanted you to see." They stood in silence for a long moment before Howland finally nodded and lowered his weapon. "Come, you're not safe here." In the Reed camp, Ned ate fresh food for the first time in weeks. He drank clean water. He allowed himself to sleep without a knife in his hand, and when he woke, Howland was waiting. "They'll say you're a dead man walking. They'll call you a traitor still." "Let them," Ned said, rubbing his temples. "I'm not coming back to clear my name. I'm coming back to finish what I should have started." Howland's eyes darkened. "And what is that?" "Cutting the root out of the rot," Ned replied. "I'm going to expose the Lannisters. Every lie, every murder. I want Robb to know the truth. I want the North to know I still fight for it." "You'll start a war." "There's already a war," Howland nodded. "Then it's time the South remembers that wolves don't die." "Easy." And so the plan began. Letters were written, but not in Ned's hand. Secrets whispered, messengers sent, old alliances tested. Ned Stark couldn't march on King's Landing, not yet. But he could feed a storm. He could make the truth bleed into the cracks of the kingdom until no lie could hold it together. And if Catelyn knew, he lived. If Robb believed his father still drew breath, then the war for the North would not be one of vengeance. It would be one of reckoning, and winter would answer for what was stolen. Ravens flew under moonlight. Silent wings carried deadly truth across Westeros, to bannermen, to old friends, to quiet houses that once swore to the direwolf. Each letter bore no signature, but the words were unmistakably his. Howland Reed wrote them, but the voice within them belonged to Ned Stark, firm, cold, and too honest to be false. "The man you saw die was not me. The truth is not dead, and neither is the North." They reached White Harbor, Bear Island, even Old Flint. Some tossed the messages into fire, thinking, "In madness." Others wept. But most, especially those who still remembered the honor of House Stark, read every word twice and passed it to the next house in silence. If Ned Stark was alive, then everything had changed. In Winterfell, Robb sat in the great hall, the weight of command already pressing him down. The bannermen spoke of strategy, of war, of crossing the Neck, but none of them noticed when Maester Luwin placed a torn letter before him. He read it once. His hand trembled. His breath caught. Then he read it again and again. When he finally looked up, the boy was gone. A man stood in his place. "I need quiet," he said. Luwin nodded, understanding something had shifted. Robb stared into the fire for hours, the words repeating like thunder in his skull. His father was alive, betrayed, escaped, and in hiding. because the crown still wanted his head. But that meant they had tried to kill him under lies. Everything he'd been told was a cover, a false history painted in blood. He sent for Catelyn in the middle of the night. When she saw his face, her heart clenched. "What is it, Robb?" He handed her the letter. She read the first line. "I'm not dead." And her knees almost gave out. The rest blurred through her tears. Robb steadied her. "We have to be sure," he said. "We are," she whispered. "I'd know his words if I were deaf and blind." But it wasn't just joy that filled her. It was fury. They had paraded her husband's death like a prize. The Lannisters had put her daughters in chains and sent falsehoods across the realm. Cersei, Joffrey, that vile, twitching boy who called himself king. Tywin Lannister pulling the strings from his golden perch. They would all pay. And so the tone of war shifted. Robb no longer marched as a grieving son. He marched as the heir of a living Stark, a wolf returning not to mourn, but to bite. But whispers reach further than steel. And back in King's Landing, rumors began to stir. A merchant claimed he'd seen a northern man in Gulltown who looked an awful lot like the Warden of the North. A beggar told of a ship that left Blackwater the night before the execution. One too small for coin and too secret for trade. The Queen scoffed. "Lies and wine dreams," she said. But Varys said nothing. He simply watched and listened. Tyrion, sharp-eyed and more curious than his sister, caught the shift in the spider's gaze one night. "You've been quieter than usual, Varys," he said. "A dead man troubling your sleep?" Varys gave him a small smile. "Dead. Men don't whisper in corridors, my lord, but ghosts. Ghosts do." Tyrion leaned back, suddenly less amused. "You're saying Ned Stark is alive?" "I'm saying," Varys whispered, "that when you kill a man like Eddard Stark and the realm doesn't bury him right, he tends to rise." The hand of the king frowned. "If that's true, we're standing on rotten ground. Then I hope you wear boots, my lord." South of the Neck, the war for the North changed tone. No longer was it a march for revenge. It became something far more dangerous. A reckoning. And in the marshes, Ned Stark sharpened his sword not with whetstone, but with memory. He thought of Robert, of Lyanna, of Jon Snow, and the promise he had kept. He remembered the lies he was forced to carry for the sake of peace, lies that now suffocated his family. He would not die a silent man again. And when he rose from the mud and rot, the realm would see what happened when you try to kill a wolf in its den. In the winding alleys of King's Landing, where shadows had names and blades whispered secrets, a little girl moved like smoke. Her clothes were torn, hair tangled, but her eyes, those storm-grey Stark eyes, were alert, always watching. Arya Stark had survived rats, hunger, and worse, and still she clung to life like a wolf to a wounded limb. She hadn't believed it when the rumors reached the streets. Ned Stark is alive. It had started as drunk talk, a sellsword claiming he saw a ghost in the marshes. A brothel girl swearing her client whispered the North rides not for vengeance, but for its living lord. Arya had tried not to listen. She had buried her grief deep, hardened herself like a sword needle. But the name, Ned Stark. Every time it passed through her ears, it cracked her shell a little more. One night, outside a butcher's stall, she heard it again, this time from a cloaked man with a northern accent. "I don't care what they say. The wolf walks again. That boy Robb, he's not marching alone." The man vanished into the dark, but Arya followed, quietly, carefully, just as Syrio had taught her. She trailed him through alleys until he ducked into a tavern near the Street of Flower. Through the half-open door, she caught words that hit like thunder in her chest. "Reed sent a raven to White Harbour, wrote it in cipher, but Maester Theomund swore the handwriting matched a letter he kept from years ago, said it was Lord Eddard's." Another voice grunted. "And you believe that? I believe the Lannisters lie, and I believe wolves don't stay dead unless you burn the bones." Arya's heart pounded. Her knees threatened to give out, but she clenched her fists until they hurt. If her father was alive, if even a chance of it was true, she had to find a way to reach the north, or at least get a message to Robb. But she couldn't. Not yet. Too many eyes, too many Lannister guards who'd kill her the moment they saw her face. She had no allies, no protection, only needle and rage. So she waited, watched, planned. Meanwhile, far beyond the capital's filth, the South began to tremble beneath a truth it couldn't smother. At Riverrun, Catelyn met with Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, and showed him Ned's message. His jaw tightened. "Then our war is not just righteous. It's necessary," he said. "We don't just fight for pride. We fight for a man wronged and hunted." And so new plans were drawn. Scouts sent deeper into the Riverlands. Messages dispatched to houses that had once hesitated. Even some Baratheon loyalists, those still bitter over Renly's death and wary of Stannis' fire-obsessed cause, began to reconsider. Because if Ned Stark was alive, it meant the Lannisters didn't just execute a lord. They lied to an entire realm. In King's Landing, the walls began to sweat. Tyrion, now Hand, felt it first. His spies grew silent. Some defected. Gold cloaks took bribes from men with northern brooches. And when a servant in the Red Keep found a wolf's tooth pendant buried beneath the great sept's altar, the queen nearly tore the floor apart looking for spies. But the cracks were already there. Ser Jaime, newly returned, sensed it too. "You've made too many enemies," he told Cersei one night. "Even ghosts don't stay buried here." Cersei spat her wine. "Ned Stark's dead. I saw it." "No, you saw a man's head," Jaime said quietly, "and you trusted the spider to make sure it was the right one." Cersei paused. Her wine no longer tasted sweet. And somewhere in the marshes of the Neck, Ned Stark stood in silence as a raven landed on his shoulder. A letter hung from its leg, one written in Robb's hand. "Father, I believe you. I await your command." His breath hitched. He could almost hear his son's voice behind the words. He turned to Howland Reed. "It's time," he said. "Time the wolf howled again." Arya didn't sleep that night. She sat curled up beneath a rotting cart behind the tavern, fingering the hilt of needle, her father's name pounding through her head like war drums. She could barely breathe for how much her chest ached, from hope, from fear, from fury. If he was alive, then they lied. They killed Sansa's spirit with fake grief. They paraded her through court while crows feasted on a lie. She wouldn't cry, not again, not for them. She would bleed someone first. By dawn, she had a plan. She went to the old man with no name, the one who called himself Jaqen H'ghar, the man in the cage who spoke like riddles. She had helped free him from the gold cloaks weeks ago, and in return he had promised her 3 deaths. She hadn't used the last one yet. Now she would. She found him behind the stables, eating an apple like he had all the time in the world. His hair was 2 colors, his smile thin as a blade. "A girl comes again," he said. Arya nodded. "She has a name." Jaqen looked up. "The last name?" She swallowed hard. "Sir Meryn Trant." His brows lifted just slightly. "A dangerous name, a noisy death." "I don't care," she whispered. He nodded once. "It shall be done." That evening, Sir Meryn stumbled outside a brothel, bleeding from the eyes, his tongue nailed to his own belt. The guards panicked, the nobles whispered, and Arya disappeared again into the shadows. Back in the north, Ned Stark sat before a fire, rereading Robb's letter. Each word felt like a breath from another life. He longed to ride for Winterfell, to hold his son, to take up the sword in open daylight and shout the truth to all of Westeros. But war did not reward honor. He'd learned that the hard way. Howland Reed stepped into the tent quietly. "It's ready," he said. Ned looked up. "Everything?" Reed nodded. "We've got 10 ravens, all flying in different directions. Each one carries the same thing, the truth about Joffrey, about Robert's death, about your arrest." And the parentage? Ned asked, voice like stone. Yes. Everything you knew. The Baratheon line died with Robert. Joffrey is not his son. Ned's fingers trembled. It will shake the whole kingdom. That's the point, Reed said. Let them tear each other apart. The South will burn in truth, and while they do, you take back the North. That night, the ravens flew. One to Stannis, one to Storm's End, one to Dorne, one to the Vale, and others scattered across the map like embers from a long-dead fire, now catching flame again. And with them, Ned sent a dagger, the one used to try to kill Bran, wrapped in a note that read, I remember everything, and so will they. Back in Riverrun, Catelyn received a message of her own. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in the hand she had traced 1,000 times in her dreams. Tell our son I'm proud. The wolf has returned. We are not done yet. She held the note against her chest, tears sliding down her cheeks as she whispered, You stubborn, beautiful fool. In King's Landing, the effect was immediate. Masters across the realm read sealed scrolls and paled. Lords began to question the throne's legitimacy. Whispers turned into accusations. Men who had sworn oaths to the Iron Throne began quietly weighing their loyalties. Stannis Baratheon, upon reading the Raven's message, slammed his fist into a table and growled, So the wolf lives, and he tells the truth I've screamed for years. He ordered his fleet readied at Dragonstone. In the Red Keep, chaos bloomed. Varys knew before anyone else. He stood in silence as he watched the ripple effect, letters pulled from sleeves, scrolls burned in panic, gold cloaks rushing through corridors. Cersei screamed at Grand Maester Pycelle. You told me his head was on a spike. Pycelle trembled. It was, my queen. It was someone else, she spat. The spider lied. He's alive. Jaime didn't laugh, didn't speak. He was thinking about war now, not for glory, but for survival. And Tyrion, ever the watcher, whispered to Bronn that night, If Ned Stark really walks the earth again, this whole game is about to break. And break it did. Because by the next week, the North rose as one. Karstarks, Umbers, Mormonts, even houses that had stayed neutral now rode under wolf banners, no longer in mourning, but in vengeance. The game had changed. Ned Stark had returned, not to kneel, but to destroy the lie that tried to kill him. The Red Keep had always been a cage dressed like a palace. Arya knew it better than most now. She moved through its bones like a shadow, listening through walls, slipping past guards who thought a girl couldn't matter. But she mattered. She had a name, and she had something none of them expected, vengeance sharpened by truth. The death of Sir Meryn Trant was just the start. The city buzzed with unrest. Cersei's rage filled the halls like wildfire, and even the gold cloaks had grown wary of her screaming fits. She blamed the Maesters. She blamed the guards. She blamed Varys, then Tyrion, then even Jaime, but she never blamed herself. Arya watched her from a servant's passage one morning as the Queen smashed a goblet against the wall, her hair undone, eyes wild. "He's alive! I know it!" she hissed. "They're laughing at me, Jaime. Do you understand? The realm is laughing." Jaime, unshaven and tired, leaned against the stone. "Then find him, kill him, but maybe stop shouting about it in every hallway." She glared at him. "Don't think you're safe just because we share blood. If this house falls, I won't be the only one buried under it." Arya watched Jaime's expression shift, not to fear, but to something colder. Doubt. That was all she needed. Later that night in the kitchens, she found her moment. The cook was distracted, the guards half drunk. She slipped into the pantry, picked up a jar of dried pears, and whispered into the shadow. "He's here," a voice answered. "I know." She turned. In the corner, half in torchlight, stood a tall figure wrapped in rags, his face hidden, but his voice was unmistakable, not to the world but to her. Gendry, her friend, the smith's bastard, thought dead, now returned like her. Father, out of shadow, out of silence. Where have you been? She asked, breathless. Pulled into the dungeons after gold cloaks raided the forge. Someone high up got me out. Been working under the Red Keep ever since. For who? He hesitated. Varys. Arya blinked. He's helping you. He's helping everyone, Gendry said, but mostly himself. Arya's voice lowered. Do you know the truth? About Ned Stark? Gendry nodded. I know he's not dead, and I know Varys helped him vanish. Her hands clenched. Then we use it. He looked at her, surprised. How? She stepped forward, eyes cold. Cersei's losing control. The whole court is trembling. But if we want to break them, we need to strike somewhere it hurts. Somewhere close. Gendry frowned. Like where? Arya smiled. Joffrey. Meanwhile, Robb Stark stood on the border of the Riverlands, thousands of Northmen behind him. The banners of House Stark flew high, but this time they weren't edged in mourning black. They were edged in grey and red, the colour of retribution. Robb had changed. The boy king was now the wolf general. The rumours of his father had hardened him. He no longer hesitated when giving orders, no longer doubted the war ahead. He addressed his men from a hilltop. They tried to bury my father's name, he said, voice loud, wind catching his cloak. But you can't bury the North. You can't kill what knows how to survive. The Lannisters sent a lie across the realm, and we believed it. But no, more. Now they'll hear the truth in our steel. They'll feel it in their bones. Cheers rose like thunder. Below, in their camps, House Manderley, House Glover, House Serwyn, all of them began to move south. The northern invasion was no longer about honour, it was about reckoning. In the Vale, word reached Lady Lysa Arryn that her sister's husband was alive, and for the first time in years her grip on power faltered. Petyr Baelish, ever the spider of ambition, turned pale. His schemes had been built on Ned Stark's corpse. If Ned walked again, then everything Littlefinger had touched might rot. He sent out riders, assassins, spies, but he was already too late. Because in the shadows of King's Landing, Varys met with Tyrion in the Tower of the Hand. He handed him a scroll. "What is this?" Tyrion asked. Varys smiled. The last nail. Lord Eddard's full confession. The real one. About Joffrey. About Cersei. About the bastard born of incest who sits the throne. Tyrion read it once and said only 2 words. "We're for Ked." Varys chuckled. "Not yet. But we will be. Unless we choose a side." Tyrion stared at the window, toward the Red Keep's towering spires. "I've already chosen," he muttered. "I'm just hoping I don't die for it." Down below, in the hidden cellars, Arya sharpened her blade, and in the north, Ned Stark mounted a horse. The truth was riding, and it wasn't stopping for anyone. The sky over King's Landing turned grey, not with storm, not yet, but something colder, like the city knew the truth was coming. Like even the wind carried Ned Stark's name in whispers. The Red Keep stood tall, but beneath it cracks were spreading. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, legs swinging like a bored child's, though he wore the crown of kings. The small council buzzed around him like nervous flies. Tyrion stood to the side, arms crossed, watching the court rot from within. Lord Baelish looked thinner. Pycelle stammered more than usual. And Cersei. Cersei paced like a wolf with a bleeding wound. She refused to show. Then came the raven, a black-feathered bird that dropped a scroll in the centre of the council's table. Varys picked it up slowly, fingers delicate, voice unreadable as he read aloud. From the true Warden of the North, once thought dead. Eddard Stark speaks these words so the realm may judge them in daylight. Silence swallowed the hall. Tyrion watched his sister's face lose all colour. The boy on the throne is no Baratheon. He is the son of Jaime and Cersei Lannister. I once held my tongue to protect the realm. I will not make the same mistake twice. Joffrey stood, fists clenched. Lies! The traitor lies! But no one moved, no one cheered, no one swore loyalty. They just stared, uncertain, afraid. The court had grown too used to silence, and now the truth screamed. That night, a riot broke out near Flea Bottom. Someone painted the gates of the Sept of Baelor with blood and ashes. "The North remembers." It read in red, in fury. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei collapsed into her chair, staring into nothing. Jaime tried to speak to her. "I warned you," he said. "You should have let the lies die quietly." Cersei snarled. "And now what? Let them take the throne. Let wolves rule the realm." "No," he said calmly. "You let your son burn for your sins." Meanwhile, in the dungeons, Arya Stark stood before the door to the royal kennels, cloaked in shadows. Gendry at her back, whispering, "Are you sure about this?" She nodded. "I know what he fears most." She pushed the door open. The hounds were starving, unfed for days, kept brutal and wild, the crown's beasts trained to devour. She dropped a blood-soaked cloth onto the floor. It wasn't Joffrey's blood, not yet, but it would be soon, and the hounds would remember the scent. The next morning, Arya watched from the shadows as the kennel master found his dogs all restless, mouths dripping, teeth bared at the scent still lingering on the stones. She whispered to Gendry, "We don't have to kill him." Gendry raised a brow. "You don't," she smirked. "We let him run. Let them all see what kind of king he really is." And just like that, the next plan began. Elsewhere, in the Godswood near the Neck, Ned Stark rode with 12 men. Not an army, not yet, but each one loyal, each one deadly. Howland Reed rode beside him, handing him a small satchel. Letters from the Vale, from White Harbor, from men who once doubted. Ned read the seals. "They're with us now?" "Every one of them." He let out a breath, heavy with the weight of the last year. "I never wanted a war," he said. "I know," Reed answered, "but war wanted you." They stopped at a clearing just before the King's Road bent toward the Riverlands. There, a scout returned with news. "Robb's across the Trident. The Freys opened the bridge. He's headed south. He says the North rides not for revenge, but to reclaim its name." Ned nodded. He no longer wore the black leathers of Winterfell. He wore something plainer now. No crown, no banners, just a blade on his hip and truth in his step. He turned to Reed. "Send the signal, let them know. The wolf walks again." Reed raised a torch, and across the hills a column of fire shot into the sky. It was not a call to arms, it was a call to witness. In King's Landing, Tyrion saw it first. From the ramparts, a distant fire, a warning. He turned to Bronn. "That's not a siege. That's a statement." Bronn squinted. "You think it's Stark. I know it is." And somewhere beneath them, Arya moved through the Red Keep with confidence now, with certainty, because the lie was dying, and soon the man they all thought gone would ride into the sun, not with an army behind him, but with the truth as his sword. And the truth, at last, was hungry. The gates of King's Landing had held against armies before. They had resisted siege engines, rebel kings, and wildfire, but they had never faced what was now coming. Not steel, not flame, but a man. A father the world thought dead. And the truth he carried. From the hills beyond the Blackwater, the northern host approached. Robb Stark led from the front, his direwolf Grey Wind loping beside his horse. Behind him flew the banners of Stark, Manderley, Glover, Tallheart. No longer were they cloaked in mourning black. They rode in silence, not to scream or boast, but to deliver a reckoning. The Goldcloaks manning the walls looked out and saw not an army of vengeance, but of memory. And memory terrified them more than swords. Inside the Red Keep, chaos bloomed like rot. Cersei had locked herself inside her chambers. The High Septon refused to speak for her. Jaime sharpened his sword, but his eyes were haunted distant, as if he knew deep down that the day of reckoning had come, and even his blade couldn't stop it. And in the shadows of the dungeons, Arya Stark crept like a ghost, closer now to the throne room than she had ever dared. Gendry waited at the lower levels, watching her with worried eyes. "You sure you don't want help?" "I don't need help," she whispered, slipping needle into her belt. "I need him to see me. I need him to remember the girl he thought." He broke. She left him in silence. Outside the city, Robb halted his men. A lone rider stepped forward from the trees behind the army. Eddard Stark, alive, whole, but changed. His beard greyed. His eyes sunken but sharp as ever. His sword strapped to his back like an oath long broken and now reforged. The gates opened without a fight, because fear does more than fire ever could. The small folk wept in the streets when they saw him. "The wolf lives," someone whispered. "Lord Stark." "The warden has come home," said another. Inside the throne room, Joffrey sat stiff on the iron throne. His crown slipped sideways. His hands shook slightly. Around him stood a line of knights, unsure whether they were guards or prisoners now, and then the doors opened. Arya stepped in first. No cloak, no disguise, just a girl, not broken, not lost, but forged like steel. Joffrey's eyes widened. You're supposed to be dead," Arya smirked. "So are you." Then behind her the hall fell silent. Ned Stark walked through the doors like he'd never left. Not a ghost, not a myth. A man made of truth and quiet fury. The knights didn't move. Jaime Lannister leaned against a pillar, watching, not lifting his sword. Joffrey stood, desperate. "Guards, arrest him! That's a traitor, that's a—" But no one moved, not a single blade raised. Ned stepped forward. "I knelt once, and I bled for it. I won't kneel again." He stopped in front of the throne, looking down at the boy who had cost him everything. "You wear a crown made of lies, Joffrey. And today the lies end." Cersei burst into the hall, screaming, "Kill him! Kill them both!" But Jaime stepped forward. "No." She froze. You would betray?" "I'm already a Kingslayer," he said coldly. "What's one more if it's the right one?" Joffrey stumbled down the steps, tripping on his own fear. Arya moved like lightning. Needle flashed. She didn't kill him. Not. Yet she cut him. Shallow, across the cheek. "Now you'll remember," she said. Ned stood over the throne and looked around. "I was never your enemy," he said. "I tried to keep the realm from tearing itself apart, but the throne wanted lies, and now those lies have come home." Tyrion stepped forward. "And what now, Lord Stark?" Ned met his eyes. "The boy is no king. The realm must decide what to do with the rest of the Lannisters. But this," he pointed to the Iron Throne, "this isn't power, it's poison." Later that day, Joffrey was taken from the throne in chains. Cersei was imprisoned, screaming. Jaime disappeared before nightfall, and the people of King's Landing poured into the streets, not for battle, but for truth. In the quiet after, Arya stood beside her father in the godswood planted inside the Red Keep's walls. "You came back," she said. Ned looked at her, eyes soft. "I never stopped trying." She reached for his hand, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he let the weight of grief slide off his shoulders. Robb would be named king in the north. Stannis would march on Dragonstone, his claim weakened, and the Iron Throne remained empty. But Westeros had remembered, and it would never forget again, because you can kill a man, but not the truth he dies for, not when he comes back to finish what he started.